All right, let's go ahead and get started, folks. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, everybody. It is March 31st. Welcome to the Shawnee County Board of County Commissioners. I'm Aaron Mays, currently representing District 3 and the chair this year. On my left is Commissioner Bill Rippon, representing District 1, and on my right is Commissioner Kevin Cook, representing District 2. First item, please.
First item is item 3, consent agenda.
We've got 3 items on the consent agenda. I would move for approval.
Second.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Mays, seconded by Commissioner Cook. Those in favor say aye. Opposed, motion passes 3-0. Next item, please.
Item 4, new business, A, County Clerk number 1, consider all voucher payments.
Okay, under building and maintenance, Maracrete LLC totaling $14,217.50 is for concrete work for Munn Memorial, which turned out nice. I think it looked really good. Under District Court, Splash Top Inc., $10,048.50 is for software for support of remote workers. Under State Grant, Kansas Fencing, $16,000 is for security fence gate installation for Fool's Landing. For those of you who don't know where Fool's Landing is, that is a boat ramp on the east side of town. Under federal grant, paid with the shuttered venue funds, Midwest Coating, Inc., $12,565 is for roof replacement at Helen Hawker. Total vouchers as of March 30th, 2022 is $1,295,224.62. If there's no questions or comments, I would move for approval.
Second.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Cook, or Rippon, seconded by Commissioner Cook. Those in favor say aye. Opposed, motion passes 3-0. Next item, please.
Item A2, consider correction orders.
I'll move for approval of the correction orders.
Second.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Mays, seconded by Commissioner Cook. Those in favor say aye. Opposed, motion passes 3-0. Next item, please.
Item B, Public Works number 1, consider approval of a project budget, Northwest 66th over Indian Creek, Shawnee County Project S121056.00, KDOT Project C514701, at an estimated total cost, shared cost of $967,900. Shawnee County's share will utilize funds from the county's bridge portion of the 2017 to 2031 half-cent county-wise sales tax program.
Good morning, Commissioners. Kurt Niehaus, Director of Public Works. This is, as Cindy referred to it, this is a joint KDOT county project. It's located on Northwest 66, just probably 100 to 200 foot east of North Topeka Boulevard. I'm here before you asking you to approve a project budget. Normally when we approve a project budget, that means that we're real close to letting this project. In this case, because KDOT's involved, we're not real close to letting the project, but nevertheless, it's time to get a project budget on paper. Again, the total cost of the project is estimated at around $970,000. Construction costs will be paid 80% by KDOT. All remaining costs will be paid 100% by the county. We anticipate when this project's done, this project will be half the cost to the county of a typical county-only funded bridge project. We anticipate having plans completed by early December, and then KDOT will let this project in March of next year. With that, I look forward to your questions.
Commissioner Rippon.
Will KDOT be bidding this project?
Yes. Yes, this will be a KDOT bid project.
All right.
Any other questions?
I have none.
Okay, so you said it might take a little bit longer because of KDOT. We're thinking 2023, like a year from this summer, or?
Well, it'll be let in March. Typically, it takes maybe 30 to 60 days to get through all the paperwork and the bid associated things that KDOT does. I anticipate maybe a early May start. And then work would take place over the summer and complete by either late summer, early fall. That's just an estimate.
Okay. All right. I'll go ahead and move for approval then.
Second.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Mays, second by Commissioner Cook. Those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0.
Thank
Next-
you.
Thanks, Kurt. Next item, please.
Item C, Planning Department, number 1, overview of wind energy conversation systems, conversion systems. Tough word.
That's what we call it, Wes. Good morning, Commissioners. Randy Anderson, Planning Director, Planning Department. I'm sure all of you have seen these giants across the highways. If you head out I-70, you know what they look like. This presentation is intended just to give you an overlook of this industry and their potential arrival in this county and how we can regulate them from a land use perspective. So I'm going to start by giving you an idea. We're going to talk about the wind, why they're coming here, what are the long-term trends, the industry focus area, and the wind power generation suitability, how it affects Shawnee County. If you look at this picture, a lot of this has to do with geography. The areas in the darker colors have the highest measure of wind, average wind power. So clearly the ones that are in blue are at the top of mountains. They're in the Great Lakes. That's true all the way through New England down to the Appalachians. And you see there's some high wind areas off the coast of the oceans because of the vetch of the winds, the fetch of the winds blowing in from the coast. If you look at this map also, where you see cell towers, I mean, where you see WEX facilities, they aren't in those areas. They're in more of the dark blue and the second shade of blue below that. And from this, you can tell that there's a hotbed area in the Panhandle of Texas through Oklahoma and Kansas, and this area right through here is obviously the Flint Hills. So we're close enough to that area where there are natural factors from the geography of where we are to the mountains and the coast that play into where they would like to be. This shows you in this more detail that most of the towers they put up is they're at the 80 meters, which is 262 feet. So what they do is they want to know what the speed is at that altitude, because that's what it takes in order to make the machines be profitable and generate the energy they need to function as intended. So you can see basically the same thing you saw before, only in more detail. You see that the Midwest plains is, when you go at that altitude, the areas in the mountains drop off, and then the plains become the #1 spot. Then when I'm going to show you the map in here in a minute, you're going to see that basically from Indiana up to Minnesota and the Dakotas and down to West Texas and into New Mexico and eastern Colorado is where they really are locating these facilities in large numbers because of this factor. If you look closer at that chart and zoom in on Shawnee County, you can see that we're located, here's Topeka, and some of those blue areas and some of the violet areas do encroach, or not encroach, but they are located in parts of the county, and they can actually make the towers work in these dark reds and oranges too. So that's why they're looking at us, because they're trying to avoid the Flint Hills, but they want to be close enough to the areas where the wind is generally at a average rate that they can be profitable if they install these facilities. So that's how it affects us, why they're looking here. I'm going to send you all a copy of this PDF afterwards so you can look at this in more detail. This is this is 2017 numbers. It's hard to see, I'm looking at the overhead, but this is what's happening in Kansas as of 2017. All the proposed facilities are basically shown on this map. And there's two corridors that are coming in our direction. The most obvious one is the one that's roughly from Dodge City up through this location up to around Hayes and Salina, and then back to the east. And there's another corridor that's starting from North Texas, Oklahoma, and coming in through Wichita and moving toward the Kansas City area. So you wonder, okay, why are they moving in that direction? I'm gonna tell you here. If you look at this map, you see this crosshatch line, this broken line that starts roughly at around St. Joseph, come down to western Kansas, central Kansas, north central Kansas, and down to western Kansas. That's what they refer to in the industry as the grain belt line. I'll explain why that matters here on the next slide, if this thing goes. Okay, I'm going to skip that one for now. The Grain Belt Express. In 2020, the state of Missouri approved, after a lot of years of trying to figure out where this line needed to be, they've approved a line basically north of St. Charles, between St. Charles, Missouri, and Hannibal. That's going to stretch from Illinois all the way across the state of Missouri into St. Joseph. So if you go back to that slide, that main line then connects to St. Joseph up here, and it feeds all this area from West Texas, North Texas, and Oklahoma, and Kansas up to that spot, and eventually it all heads toward the Chicago area, where there's a main district, where it would feed the national grid. So that's why, and if you go back to this map, you see that northeast Kansas has kind of been left untouched as of 2018, and I'd say that's still the case in 2022. You see the lines, you see all the activity in West Texas, into Oklahoma and Kansas, and then it heads up to Missouri, and you see a lot of activity up in Minnesota and Illinois and Indiana. That's where it's all connecting to for a national wind power grid. So that's why they're looking here. I think we're like the last mile or two to kind of fill out the grid. So they may not be coming with a wind farm, but they may be coming to us for some other kind of wind-related project to be the next step or two in that process of connecting toward the St. Joseph area. So the trends are pretty clear what's happening. And if you look at this other chart up here, you'll see that of the wind generated electricity, Kansas does rate at the top, or near the top. Believe it or not, Iowa and South Dakota are higher, and the places you don't really think of as being the big wind producers, Texas and California, they are actually lower on this chart, along with Oklahoma, than Kansas is. I think if you look at the state of Kansas, they have adopted, they want to become energy sufficient and move toward green power as much as possible, and that's been carried forward by Evergy. I just looked at this yesterday. They adopted a plan in 2021 of how they want to be providing services in the future. If you look at 2010, I'm going to break this down by type. The dark blue is the coal generation. In 2010, they were 52%. Now they're roughly about 40%. They want to eventually, by 2040, end up at 7%. That's a pretty radical decrease. They're looking to go carbon neutral by 2045. That's why these numbers are broken out the way they are. Another thing that's interesting is in 2010, this little green area, that 1% there that's wind, and wind presently is roughly, it went from 1% to 27%, and it's heading up toward the low 30s. And one of the colors that you don't see on this table is this blue color. That's solar. There is no solar in 2010. There's no solar now, and they want that to eventually become 17%. So clearly, they're transitioning from carbon based to wind, or to kind of balance their delivery of services. So these are all the trends that are kind of driving this and why this is coming, why we're discussing it today. A lot of the data regarding solar and the WEX is kind of dated. They don't update these tables very often. The last thing I could find, these are all the projects. The things that are in red were proposed in 2014. The blue are things that were under construction then, and the green is what is currently operating as of 2014. You see there's not a whole lot of green, but there's a lot of red and a lot of blue. So it is coming, and you see the two corridors represented by the Dodge City, Salina route and the Wichita route starting to move up in this direction toward the Kansas City suburbs. So these are the trends. This is the backdrop of why we're discussing this. And I would say that we have been approached by potential customers who are looking in this area just as feelers of wanting to find out what the county is thinking, what the county has on the books as far as regulation. And so they are looking here, actively looking here. I'm gonna show you this. This is kind of a gee whiz graphic. Get it to come up on the screen. Okay. Oh, I want it to go. No, it's already. This shows you the growth. I'm gonna start it again. But California and Texas, the dark greens are California and Texas. That's where the power was the greatest. The use of wind power in 1999, and you see how it has filled out in the time since then, where now the greens are also in Oklahoma and Kansas, Colorado, Wyoming, New Mexico. So here's the start. Kansas had 2. Kansas was way behind, and now you look at the whole Midwest. We were way behind the curve of the wind energy industry, and now we have filled in where this is Main Street wind, and where they want it, and where the industry is looking for it to go. Put that in perspective. We had two in 1999, and by the end of this run, we're up to about 3,000. Yeah, we're over 3,000. We're almost 4,000 by 2014, and I'm sure we're more than that now. So the industry is coming, and that's why we like to kind of broach this topic to kind of get ahead of it if we can. Okay, get this PowerPoint back on the screen. Go forward. Didn't mean to shut the thing down. So that's your background of where we are and how we've come. This is a quick introduction to how the thing functions and some of the quirks about it that you may not be aware of. Obviously, the scale. You see the traditional windmill and the size of the wind tower. Market difference from a 40-foot tall windmill to something that's 262 feet tall, and but these things to function and be economical to run these things, you never see a wind farm that is tiny with 4 or 5 sites. You'll see something that looks more like this, where you have dozens of units. They'll find a favorable ridge line or a plateau where it's exposed to wind, the higher value of wind, and they like to stay in that area and kind of. I hate to use the word exploit, but they like to exploit that ridge that's open until they get the biggest bang for their buck. Because they're going to be building a lot of supporting facilities along with the windmills. This is an example of what we're looking at. This is one that's out by Hayes. You see the city of Hayes is back here, and to the west, there's a large wind farm site. This is the scale we're talking about. If you can, you know how the county roads, how the grid works in Shawnee County. So you can translate that to this situation. You can see how much land that would encompass somewhere in the county if they were to do something even on that scale. For them, the economy of scale warrants they go big, or they don't go at all unless they're building some kind of support facility for the grid to bring power through it. It's usually a site that's pretty good size, several acres, and then they'll build it out over a number of years as they bring new towers online. So that's what we're talking about. Again, on the scale side, this is kind of a funny one. You can see how it's big enough where you could have a small apartment in the thing. So we're talking about a big structure, as you know. And what's in there is you have the blades, the hub, you have the main shaft that's turned by the winds, and there's a turbine in there. All the power that feeds the facility, and the power that it generates it's all handled through the interior of the stem of the WEC. And there's a small transformer box out in front of the tower to regulate the energy flow into the structure. Here's another picture that shows the guts. The thing I want to show that's important here is there's obviously computers on the structure. There's weather monitoring services on the tower, and as the wind direction changes, as the wind speed changes, the angle of the blades and the direction that the tower is oriented toward will change. What the magic number for them is they're looking to get to a point where the blades rotate at 18 revolutions per minute. That's the magic number for them to be profitable. If it's less than that, they'll usually shut the thing down because they're not getting the value for the wear and tear on the equipment. So 18 is the magic number, and then the machine will always look to try to get that number without the blades going too fast. If the wind's blowing too hard, they'll shut it down because the machine can't handle that excessive level of wind. It needs to be somewhere, a nice steady 15, 20 mile an hour wind, and they can make the machines be profitable. So they try to optimize that number where 18 to 20 revolutions per minute. This is a shot looking into the stem. You're on the ground looking up. There's obviously a huge ladder that some unfortunate person has to climb to get to the top of the thing to service it. You see the power system, all the cables running up and down with the electricity, bring things up. So it's all self-contained under the ground, and then it flows up through this tower stem up to the top of the tower. And usually when you see these things, you always see overhead power lines, the large-scale regional lines where the wind farm is connecting into a tower system that feeds the grid. So the wind. You have the wind power, then the mechanical power, and it equals electric power at the end that flows into the infrastructure that provides this energy. So that's a quick overview. I mean, when you see a wind farm, you're not just going to be seeing the wind farm. You're going to be seeing some of the supporting activity of a regional tower. If it's not already there, it'll be extended out to the property. This gives you an idea of the scale when they put these things up. A lot of what you don't see is underground. This is the concrete footing that goes in. It goes in 8 feet deep, and there's a what they call a rock socket that goes down below that to like a giant piling type of a centering structure. That goes down an additional 20 feet. The width of the stem is 13 feet wide. The width of the foundation is 46. So when you put one of those in, there's a lot that's going on under the ground to make sure that it stays stable and it's not going to be adversely affected by too much wind or other conditions like ice and things that might have it might damage the facility. When they put that in, this is kind of an idea of what it looks like. They're working here on the footing. They have a foundation. This one's being put in a little bit different. They got a lower foundation and then they paved the next section to get it up to the full height of the 8 feet foundation. And you see the stem is right there ready to go up, but you can see from the grade that on the back of the picture, you can see that they've cut this thing down at least 8 feet, maybe a little bit more to put this one in. That's just an idea of how much superstructure is actually on the property. You don't see any of that. And here it is again. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here, but it just shows you that you have the foundation and all the cabling and the electricity in and out is through the middle of the core of the stem. And there's a picture looking straight down into the stem before the big structure then sits on top of that and is bolted down onto this foundation. So it's a pretty substantial investment they make. The transportation is important for us to consider here because this is where kind of some of the concern that some of you probably have and staff definitely shares. When you bring these things into a property, obviously it's a giant effort. You have huge trucks, huge facilities that are being brought in. This could obviously have, if they're not careful, could damage the pavement, damage the road, curbs, sidewalks, infrastructure that's alongside the road that's operated by the public or the supporting utilities along the right of way. This picture I like because it gives you an idea of the scale. We all know what the size of a roundabout is. This thing's coming down the road, and you got light standards along the highway, and they actually drive this thing down the middle of the roundabout in order to avoid the telephone poles and the light standards that are out there. So they're obviously going to be running over curbs, sidewalks, other things. It's not an easy job to bring something of this scale into any jurisdiction. Because of that, they like to locate them as close as possible to interstate highways and state highways and U.S. highways, so they can minimize the number of roads and turns to get from the highways or the railroads onto a property, onto a county road in anybody's jurisdiction. So the farm will usually be somewhere in the proximity of some pretty good accessible highway infrastructure. And this is kind of what the site construction will look like. There's usually a couple cranes out there. One holds the tower, another one wrenches it up to get into position, and then the second one will then put it down onto the stem, begin to erect it, and fasten it down to the foundation. This is, again, the scale. When you have these things, you're going to have heavy, large equipment out there that are setting these things up. So it's the way it is, the way it's set up now. But again, you see generally on every one of these sites, there's a couple of cranes that are out there. They move the cranes around to each individual site as they want to put up a new tower and begin to operate the tower. But again, you start to see the scale of it again in relation to the surrounding area in this picture. And about the scale again, before I go into the maintenance, you see the wind farm on the background. This picture shows you, they usually line them up. We've all seen them. They all work together as a single utility, and you never see a small wind farm. It's either they go for the gusto of making it profitable, and if it's not profitable with a less number, they're not going to do them. So. That's the nature of the industry, how it functions. The maintenance, the little man climbs the ladder, gets up on top, and he goes into the facility and works on the computer, and the turbine and other elements of the interior of the structure, like I showed you before. So there's not any other, there's no one on the site. They come in and they operate it, and they maintain it as necessary. And otherwise, there's not anybody at the site who sits there and runs the machines. They run themselves. They're self-operated from a computer system somewhere far off site. Same thing. Again, you see the scale. I like to find a favorable ridge line, and string the towers along a nice exposed ridge. So, regulations in the future is the next thing I want to talk about briefly. First thing is issues and concerns. First thing is the impacts to property owners and adjoining properties is sound. What they call furling. That's basically the whoosh of the, if it's going around 18 revolutions per minute, when it gets down to the next blade, getting next to the ground, you're going to hear a of the wind that's blowing off the tower. So that's something to be aware of. Blade glint and flicker. If you're standing in relation to the tower, to the blades, and where the sun happens to be, especially if it's early in the morning or late in the night, on the edge of the blade, you're going to get that flickering. So you'll have, that will be there. It's all based on your orientation relative to the tower and where the sun is. But that's something that can bother people sometimes. Ice throws. You see more of the ice throws in parts of the country where the tower blade's not heated. They make them now where like an airplane where there's heating coils in the edge of the blade to keep the thing warm so the ice doesn't form. But there's still a possibility you could have ice throws if you have a bad enough storm, lasts long enough, it's cold enough where you might have ice get on the blades. Tower setback from property line, that's another potential impact. But there are ways you can regulate how close they can be to property lines, but that's definitely a concern that most people would have. Obviously, military and civilian aviation, most of the towers have an FAA warning light on top there. The shadows and the tower collapse are the other two factors. The environmental factors are concerns would be wildlife and habitat, threatened birds, the hawks and eagles and birds of that nature have a tendency to be affected by this. They're usually flying at that altitude where the tower blades are located. Migratory birds. In some parts of the country where the grade is severe, you have a potential erosion and stormwater pollution impact. Water quality, water supply, and of course the dust. Most of the facilities that they put out there, they're usually gravel covered. So if it blows bad enough, you're going to get dust kick off from those properties. So those are the potential adverse impacts that we might need to consider for doing some kind of regulations to ensure that they don't become an issue if they're allowed in this county. And then there's the probable public impacts. And you could be on both sides of the fence on this one. The costs, I'll talk about first. You have a lot of traffic congestion. You have damage potentially to public infrastructure, to roads, bridges, curbs, gutters, bar ditches, traffic signals, signs, lights. All those things are kind of potential things. The visual appearance, we know there's going to be people who are going to say, I don't want that ugly stuff in our county. And another question is, if the utility goes bankrupt or wants to leave the property, what do you do if it's unused or it becomes obsolete? Those are all legitimate concerns. The benefits are clearly property taxes, sales taxes. You have construction dollars spent locally. You have a workforce impact of construction jobs. Payroll goes up. And you have temporary and permanent jobs that are there at least temporarily while the wind farm builds itself out to its full size that it was approved for, and also you have the likelihood that it will attract other eco uses. If you have a wind farm, you might get a solar farm want to be in with it. So you have a combination of the two energy sources happening at the same time on the same property. things of that nature are probable public impacts that are good. The thing I like to, when you consider a WEX, the best way to kind of explain the learning curve of regulations being adopted is at the beginning with the wireless telecommunication. Everybody hated the big towers. They were 250 feet tall at the beginning, and most governments, local governments, zoned them out. They said, you know, they were prohibited, or they were so limited that the number of sites they could be placed on wasn't conducive to building out a network in a jurisdiction. And a lot of jurisdictions have put a lot of unreasonable requirements on them and ignored the technological needs of the use. So in response to that, the utility testified to Congress that we can't roll out our technology. And it said it loud enough, long enough, where in 1996, short 4 years after the technology began to roll out, we had the 96 Telecommunications Act. And different amendments to that act had basically preempted many aspects of local government control, like we saw with the cell tower a couple of weeks ago. So the result eventually became we ended up with boilerplate wireless regulations that are used across the United States, including Shawnee County, that were deemed to be reasonable and in compliance with federal law. So if you go, and so how that relates to here is basically we're at the point where we have boilerplate regulations that are out there. Riley County has them, other jurisdictions in Kansas has them, and a lot of them are in Nebraska, this north of on I-75, those counties up there have them. So it's not difficult to roll out regulations that are reasonable but do address the local concerns and aren't going to be seen as being over the top by the industry. So you can regulate them by zoning district. So you can say we only want them in the RA1 or the industrial district. I mean, you can locate. That is reasonable to consider where you want them, in which districts. You can impose reasonable development standards. That's the key word there is reasonable, and the industry has evolved to what the industry and the local jurisdictions generally consider to be reasonable. Those are out there. You can impose reasonable siting and performance standards, and reasonable decommissioning procedures of what happens if the utility goes bankrupt and you have these towers on the property. What happens then? So again, the bottom line is that we've applied those. We can apply those lessons from the telecom, how we handled that, how it's evolved into this industry, because it has been around almost as long as telecom, but it's about 10 years younger than the rollout of the telecom industry. So we can end up with an ordinance that's fair, reasonable, and legally defensible and acceptable to the wind power industry. I have a draft resolution that I talked to Mr. Rapon way back before the pandemic, and I drafted a resolution. And when the industry has contacted me about maybe projects in the county, I have sent that out and said, if we were to have regulations on this, like these, not that they're official, so would the industry have a problem? And they've looked at them and said, both times, different people have said no, because what we would bring to you would be in line with what the industry is facing in most jurisdictions around the country. So we can easily get there to cover some of the local concerns without taking off the industry where they want to suit the county for basically prohibiting it. So there are ways we can do this. In the draft resolution that I came up with, it's pretty much standard to require a computer-generated video simulation from various vantage points, including all homes within 1,000 feet. You can go out bigger than that if you want to, but that is considered to be reasonable and mainstream. You can require a cost-benefit analysis where they will actually flesh out more specifically, those costs and benefits and negative impacts potentially that I discussed on some of the previous slides. And they can do you can require them to do environmental assessments of migratory birds, other species. But the big thing is a road and construction maintenance agreement, which functions like a developer's agreement, where basically it's a contract between the jurisdiction and the industry who's coming in, saying, if this happens, then we can come back and be reimbursed for the cost of damage to the roads, the curbs, the gutters, signs, to the utilities that are along that road. So there are ways you can negotiate those kind of terms, and there are some nice boilerplate it's called a RMA, road maintenance agreement. There are good examples in this general vicinity that we can borrow from, and the county councilor can fine tune to suit the county's needs. And it is possible to write regulations of what happens when they're decommissioned or abandoned. So we can build those things into an ordinance, and we can also specifically regulate where they go in relation to scenic byways. We have such a scenic byway in the county. You can write the ordinance in a way where it says views from the scenic byway. If you can see a WEC from a scenic highway, that it's not going to be allowed. So you can push them away from certain areas that you deem to be appropriate to maintain scenic views. That's not out of the ordinary. So there are ways you can address a lot of the concerns. The concern about it's ugly and it's in your face, you can't regulate that, but you can regulate how the thing functions and where it goes in relation to other uses and how far it's set back from other uses. The future of the industry is what I discussed early in the beginning, an eco farm. What you see in front of you is a solar array. These are usually large-scale operations, and because of the size of the amount of land of a wind farm, it's very easy to combine the two uses into one site, where you can kind of kill two birds of energy generation in one area without having these things populated all over the county. Kind of like co-location. You want to have multiple cell carriers on a tower. You want to have multiple energy producers, green energy, on the same site. Same difference. The future is also technological change. It's always going to be an evolving thing. In this case, you have a smaller tower with more blades. I'm not sure what the better option is. I mean, this looks more this looks more ugly and potentially hazardous than a big tower. But I'm saying the industry is continually trying to create advantages to be more economically efficient and produce the energy that the governments are saying we want to have the green energy. So this will always be subject to periodic review and change as the industry evolves. It's just the way it goes. This looks crazy, but it is happening. The company listed on the machine, Arrows. This is a prototype. I don't want to call it a dirigible, but it acts like a dirigible, only it's more of a heavy duty machine that can pick up the size of these blades and different things on the structure and lift it up without having to bring so many resources into a site. I'm saying the industry is becoming more and more sophisticated, and the technology will only evolve. We have these commercial cargo ships that they're not airplanes, but they kind of function more like a small Hindenburg. I'd love to see this happen, but and also what many of you might have seen. I see this very commonly at certain types of uses like airports and industrial uses, where you build that thing there is a wind turbine, And I've seen them at several airports. I think DFW has one, and I've seen them in El Paso and other airports in the West where this generates energy that runs the airport. So you don't have an ugly tower, you have something that looks more architectural, something more cool than the ugly windmill type of setup. So I'm saying the industry is evolving into a lot of different forms and how these can exist. So with that, I'm open to questions, observations, thoughts.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Cook.
Randy, you said that you had started working on a possible regulation or some part of our county code regarding this energy use, correct?
Yes, sir.
Have you taken that to the planning commission yet?
Not yet, because
Why not?
because we wanted your direction, because it's a whole brand new use, and it does involve things like road maintenance agreements that I wanted this body to weigh in on basically be educated on the industry, how it functions, and then provide us some direction. What we have done is we have briefed them on the industry, and we have provided we have placeholders in the proposed draft ordinance where this can be, should you adopt regulations. It's our intention to bring it through the planning commission after we hear from you as the governing body.
Well, but typically, when you're working on the county code, you have taken that to the planning commission where there's public input, then have public input through listening sessions and meetings, and then bring it to us as the final decision makers. So you're asking us to give you direction, so we're prejudging it and then asking you to fill in the blanks?
No, I'm introducing what's happening, the trends to you, so you're aware that at some point, sometime in the future, maybe 6 months or a year, somebody may approach the county, and we just wanted to bring it to your attention.
How many turbines do we have in Shawnee County right now?
None
Okay.
of this scale.
And with the current, some of the prohibitors, what areas of the county would be targeted for turbines? Because we can't have anything around Forbes because of military and aircraft travel. You can't have anything around the Billard Airport because of airport travel. You want it to be close to the highway, so outside of far south Auburn or far north, almost to the Jackson County line on Highway 75, unless you're on Highway 24, then it gets into the floodplains and ground maybe issues with being able to find that solid fitting. Where are we looking at putting turbines?
I can't speak for the industry, but if you look at that map, where they would be is any area on here that's shown in the purple, orange, and red, which is most of the county, is suitable for it, where the industry believes they have enough space to hit the capacity number. I can't determine if those kind of locations are out there. All I know is that they are looking, and we thought we wanted to get ahead of the curve. It's easier to regulate them before they come and put something on the book before they come, and we're trying to bootstrap it while they're here. You're right. All those things are out there. I'm not arguing with you. That's all true, but.
But wouldn't Shawnee County, I mean, given there's a lot of limitations, we're probably not looking at the immediacy of a lot of wind farms, but maybe more of the solar farms, because those would have less impact on air traffic travel and being able to have those restrictions.
Those definitely would be an easier route to go.
Then wouldn't Shawnee County's role then be a big part of the energy transmission as we try to transmit that energy up to St. Joe, Missouri?
That's a very likely outcome.
And does that fall under county regulation or state regulation under the Corporation Commission?
That I don't know. You're getting beyond what a zoning ordinance would regulate, and I'm not an expert in that field. I don't know.
I'm just wondering how much of this falls to state regulation, federal regulation, as opposed to just county regulation?
Well, if you're going to rely on the state regulations, then we wouldn't have any control of where they go. So conceivably, they could be placed in any, theoretically, it could be placed in any zoning district under that premise. I think you'd like to have a little bit more control of some of the specifics that the state legislation is not geared to address, like the road maintenance agreements, the, you know, where it's at, how far away from property lines you find for it to be acceptable. You know, the state regulations don't go into the land regulation type of issues. They're going into more of the regulatory side. I think the two can work together, and we're trying to make sure that if they go in, they have a place to go and places where they know they cannot go before they start looking for properties to begin to assemble. That's where, I mean, that's as far as I think we can go on the local level.
So if ABC Company wanted to put in a wind farm on North Highway 75 right now, and given that we do not have any regulations regarding wind energy, wouldn't they just apply for a conditional use permit as they're changing it from agricultural use to a other use?
Right now, there's nothing in the ordinance that regulates them. So, I mean, usually, you could probably find a way, like under utilities, to regulate. There's a lot of districts where we don't address them at all. The ordinance is silent. They didn't exist in 1992 when the ordinance was written, and you would have to try to make it all up as you go along.
I guess
mean,
what
yeah, you could do that, but
I guess what I was asking, Mr. Anderson, is right now today, if there's no regulation specific to this energy, if a company wanted to put a turbine in Shawnee County right now, what steps would they go through?
I don't know, because the steps they go through is dependent upon the property and its zoning, where they're looking to go. If it's zoned RA1, which is where I would assume they want to go, we don't. The way our ordinance is written is we have permitted uses, conditional uses, and provisional uses. If the ordinance doesn't specifically say a CUP is required and it falls into one of those uses that are listed, or a provisional use under one of those uses, we'd have to be making it up as we go along. I mean, I have to consult with the county attorney, but I assume that we'd be looking at a CUP.
Okay, how would this be different than the cell phone tower that we were considering a couple of weeks ago that's to come back to the county commission in a couple of weeks?
The cell tower use is specifically addressed in the ordinance, and you already have a lot. You already have 4 or 5 pages worth of regulations that are in the ordinance that you adopted separately and incorporated into the zoning regulations when you adopted them. We're looking to do a similar thing. We're looking to tell you exactly where they fit and which districts you don't want them, and which districts you would consider them, and then we have a list of regulations they would have to go through so that they know going in that they've got to do all these steps like the cell tower are doing. You know, they have to provide all these reports and studies and document all these different things in order to say that they are complying with our ordinance. If you don't have any regulations, we can't say you're not complying with our ordinance. So you want to have some kind of base regulations, and then if they come in with the CUP, if you want to go further in the ordinance and regulate them to a different level because of what's around them, then you can still do that, but you want to have some kind of base regulations in there so they know where they're welcome in a county or where they're not by the zoning district. That's what we're trying to get you to that point. And I mean, I wrote the draft ordinance because it was during the pandemic. There was nothing at the time. Bill approached me and said we had people who were actively looking. It was in concert with the county counselor, so we drafted something that was considered appropriate for this county, just to have something on the books in case they came. We could quickly roll it out if you were so to direct us to do that. It didn't happen, but they didn't stop the phone calls from coming in. We just wanted to show you something that was acceptable to the industry and appropriate to address some of the concerns that you might have that we talked about in this presentation. right now, I'm at the 60,000 foot level, just trying to figure out what your thoughts are generally about the industry before we start doing any kind of process. And then, you're right, we would start with the planning commission and pitch it down there, and they would beat it up and massage it, and then we'd bring it back to you. But this is all brand-new territory for us in the county. I just wanted to show you that we are ideally suited for it, based on the geography and the factors of nature as they exist, that we're in a good location based on where the industry is going, and it's coming toward this area. It may go around us. You don't know where it's going to go. And I want to show you that there's different technological choices. You know, you saw the smaller tower with five blades as opposed to the 262 tower. Saying there's different options. With the airport here, that might drive them to a different solution without having a 262-foot tall tower. Maybe to do something that's 140 or 150. I don't know, but what I do know is I'm telling you is that they are looking here. I think Commissioner Rippon has heard it, and I've had several inquiries about it. So we're just trying to just kind of introduce the whole thing to you, and just so you're aware that it could happen before it happens. And we'd like to just basically ask your having you an opportunity to understand it a little bit better and to have this discussion.
So Randy, you know, obviously there's a lot of wind in the state right now. There's a lot of places that have already done this. It seems from just anecdotally, there's been some communities have done it really well and others have done it very poorly. Are we looking at what's happened around the state and talking with other counties to find out, you know, what did you do wrong, what did you do right, and use that in crafting our resolution here?
Absolutely. Riley County is, there's two counties. Wabaunsee, which is mainly in the core of the Flint Hills, they just flat out say we don't want them, period. So they put it in the zoning ordinance, the use, and said that use is strictly prohibited in the jurisdiction of Wabaunsee County. Riley County has done the opposite. They have adopted regulations. The only problem with their regulation, I mean, they're right middle of the road, good regulations, but what they didn't do is they didn't adopt a construction maintenance agreement where they have to reimburse the county or the jurisdiction for any kind of damages done in bringing the towers to the property. I think that's the biggest thing. Most counties that have been out, the leaders in Kansas, they didn't put that step in there. So I looked to the counties closest to here in southern Nebraska, around Beatrice and in that area, and those counties did put the construction maintenance agreement into their ordinance, and that's, I mean, so basically I combined the Riley County experience with the CMA being part of the ordinance, and pitched that to the industry, saying if we go down this type of path, would that be something that you would scream bloody murder about, or would you find it acceptable that it's a mainstream regulatory method of regulating them? And they said, oh yeah, we can comply with that easily. So the burden would be on them. So if you have all this stuff in place, all these regulations in place, then you put the burden on the provider to prove it to you that it's not going to create the type of potential adverse effects. If you don't have something that they have to, that you say it's explicitly that we want you to prove this, prove that, then they come into you, and it's up to you to make it up as you go along and try to. It's hard to come up. It's hard to think of all the things you want to consider when you're in the middle of an application. It's easier to have it all written down like a recipe that they have to prove this, and there's a whole list of things, obviously, to prove to you that it's something that would not be detrimental to public health and safety and would result in a net positive benefit on the cost-benefit analysis. So, I mean, the responsible way to do it is to have the regulations in place, then try to make them up as they come into your community. I mean, but I have looked out. I've gone beyond Kansas. I've gone into into Nebraska, because Nebraska is really the area between here, between southern Nebraska and Columbus, in that area, and eastern Nebraska is just like the area here. And they have been inundated by a number of these type of uses. And Kansas mainly a bit out in the west, and a lot of those cities out there, it's county, most of those out there are in county governments, and there's not a whole lot of regulations that were in effect when they went in.
Right.
And I think those jurisdictions have had a lot of problems with their roads being torn up and different things happening, and we're just trying to avoid. If they come, I mean, if they see the light, like Mr. Cook is saying, you know, there's airports. I mean, there's not a whole lot of big sites. They might do something that's scaled down or lower height or something. We don't know how they want to adapt.
Right. Commissioner O'Connor.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for doing all this work. This is good. This is a good start on all this. I have talked to wind energy companies. I've talked to a number of commissioners from different counties about their issues with putting wind farms in, and they've all said the same thing. You need to be ahead of the curve on this. Problems are created by not having some regulations or zoning that deal with wind energy or even solar energy, probably in the future. But they said it's critical because especially with road maintenance and decommission of towers, you need to have something in place. When these guys come in with a road, if they can't turn a corner, they create a road out in somebody's field, and then they have to take that out and put it back. But you need all those regulations in place. And so I think it's kind of critical. I'm going to back up just a little bit on talk about the grids in the United States. There's three main power grids in the United States. There's the East Coast grid, there's the West Coast grid, and then there's Texas. It's strange to say, but they're kind of like their own country. We are in the East Coast grid, so any power that we generate here is generally used for the East Coast because it's I don't know the technical term, but it's different amperage or whatever. So like our energy does not go to Colorado, but it is an exported commodity that we can create here in Kansas. And some people say, well, why would we sell it to other states? Well, why would we sell wheat to other states or countries? If we can produce it here, it's money that we're generating for Kansas. I've even heard that they're looking at doing wind fields or wind farms in western Kansas that would line up with the West Coast grid, so they could go like to Denver, etc. But we are in the East Coast grid, and a lot of these wind fields, where they go is totally generated generally on where the big transmission lines are. That they want to be close to them, and so, but we don't know where those are going to be exactly yet. And but they are eyeing our county because we're in the wind corridor. Commissioner Cook, you brought up where would they put them in this. Well, a good deal of western half of our county is open, and it could possibly be put a lot of places in the western side of the county. Decommission is a huge issue. These things aren't going to be there forever. How we have them disposed of and what they do with that big concrete base, how much of it has to be reduced, the critical issues. The other issue that's popping up with a lot of these wind fields or wind farms is the blades themselves don't last forever. They're not made of steel or aluminum or anything. They're made of like a carbon. Nobody wants these things. So, and I don't know if there's a recycle use for them. There doesn't appear to be at this moment. And it's in the scale of these things. They're enormous. And where do you go with those things? I don't think Bill Sutton wants to try to pick one up with his truck, and the landfill doesn't want them. So I think that's an issue too. Where do you go with these the parts as they wear out? They're just enormous. Like I mentioned too, I'm going to go back to talking with the other commissioners in other counties. I was at Nemaha County was one of them that I talked to. And they couldn't stress enough that getting your zoning regulations in place first will, one, keep you out of court with these wind energy companies as they come in and you try to fly by the seat of your pants and try to craft some kind of regulations as you go. It's just that's a poor way of doing business, and you could be viewed as trying to zone them out of business if. Yeah, so,
Well,
and you don't want to be in that situation.
And just as a point of, it's a coincidence that this happened. I got an email, a terse email from a county official in Osage County. They're coming in Osage County and they're looking to us. Do you have something we can look at to create an ordinance? So I mean, they're nipping around our heels.
I think it's time we put something on the books. I don't know how you feel.
I tend to agree with you, and the reason that I say that is because I think that by putting something in place in advance, it becomes about the industry and about our county rather than about a specific project. And I think that when it's about that specific project with this, whoever the company ends up being that comes, I don't want it to be about that one company. I'd rather it be about, sort of a broader picture.
Well, and to segue off that, I would like them to adapt their project to the county's needs, not us having to adapt to their wants. That to me is a more proactive way to approach it. Put down what is near and dear to your hearts, to be able to find something that's acceptable, and you put it in the form of an ordinance, and then they know that's the mark. And if they can't comply, then they'll go somewhere else. There are other options besides Shawnee County. So if our standard is up here and their standard's down there, we may not want them. But if they don't know what our standards are and they come, then we're playing catch up with them. That's not a good advantageous way to be if you're trying to bargain with them as to where they go.
There are some additional complexities, though, that come with our airports, as was mentioned earlier. I had a chance to talk with some wind energy folks at the KAC convention last year, and that was exactly what they said. Well, Topeka's, and Shawnee County is kind of an interesting thing because of the two airports and their proximity. They have to get FAA approval basically to do anything here, and they feel like it's going to be more difficult. So they kind of told me that, in so many words, that we're a lower priority than other counties because of that, because it just increased their upfront legal costs and whatnot. So, but you're right. I mean, they did specifically mention sort of the western, northwestern, and southwestern corners of the county probably being the best spots for them. But
And of course, you have the scenic byway in the southwestern part of the county. So if you have regulations, you can regulate them away from the scenic byway. So you take them out of the southwest and put them somewhere else where you don't have the same kind of consideration. If they just come and you're just stuck wherever they want to be, and you're trying to play catch up and adapt to what they're doing or proposing. And the nice thing also is that the state of Kansas has adopted a playbook of how they want to site adapt projects. So you can incorporate all those things into your regulations to use the guidance of the state and other jurisdictions with their experiences. So there's good blueprints for us to begin with, and then to adapt to how you feel about Shawnee County having some of that type of use in our county.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's opposed to wind energy at all. I just like, nobody's opposed to building houses, but we regulate where they go and how they're built, and it's the same kind of thing, so.
And they do leave a long-term impact. I mean, if they were to abandon them, you saw the investment they have to make in putting each one of those guys out there. So if somebody wanted to redevelop that property, if you don't have the industry remove the stuff from the property, then somebody else is going to have to go in there to remove the massive amount of infrastructure that's under the ground to begin to do a project. If it's not agriculture.
Yeah, I've heard of them create an escrow account once the tower's up and making a little money, and that goes for decommission of that particular tower. And so in the event that it has to be removed or it's obsolete or whatever the reason, there's some funding there to help dispose of it in whatever fashion. But yeah, I think that's the thing that needs to be looked at is, this thing may not be there forever. How does it end?
Yeah, and the commission has been briefed on these uses we've created in the draft zoning ordinance. We have created places where they could go. But the way I've suggested to Commissioner Rapon and the county councilor's office is to have two parallel courses. Let the zoning ordinance run through its course, and let this run through its course as a separate item, because this use by itself is going to be a lightning rod for people on both sides of the fence who hate it or who love it. So it's its own animal. So let's let the zoning ordinance go forward with having the placeholders in it, and then when this is adopted, right close on the same heels of the zoning ordinance, then you can adopt it in a resolution that would incorporate it by reference into the places in the ordinance where we have placeholders built in for it to go. So you could insulate both processes. I mean, it's something that's really hot and crazy on the wind. You don't want that to taint what's going on with the zoning regulations. So that's how I proposed. I mean, you can handle it any way you wish. You can roll it into the zoning ordinance, but because this is so unique, and it's going to have its own lengthy discussions like we've had here today with the public. I have two parallel courses that eventually end up with these being part of the zoning ordinance if and when this is ever adopted.
How do they handle density of these things? How many per section of ground? Is there some kind of guideline for that, or?
There's probably industry guidelines that I'm not aware of. But if you go to California, if you ever come from Joshua Tree National Park into Riverside, the density is tremendous. Because it's on a mountain ridge and they're just jammed in there, so your eyes go goofy because you're looking at all kinds of things on a lower level and up the ridge. They go up, so the density is tight. In the west, where you have more land, it's not as dense. I think generally what you see in Kansas, heading west on 70 and into Colorado, that's pretty much the norm. You want each one to have their own space out there. So so if there was to be some kind of collapse or other issue, you don't want the tower to affect the other windmills out there. So I don't know. I don't think there is an industry. If you're in tight enough terrain where you have steep grades, they can be very, very dense. But I can't imagine that happening here unless, in Mr. Cook's example, if we do have limited land where they could be, they might want to go a little denser in order to, if they find a spot, they might want to go a little denser to make the most of the limited amount of land they have here in the county.
Well, Randy, you've been up here for quite a while now. Maybe we need to continue this conversation another day, but I think we've had a lot of good information today.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I would ask that we make not a formal motion, but we advise Mr. Anderson that we are blessing him to take this issue to the Planning Commission for discussion. That's what he's asked for.
Yeah.
For the last hour, this was a presentation to ask us to bless him to take this to the Planning Commission for further discussion.
Well, and also give you a heads up of what's
So
what we're hearing.
I would bless him to take this to the Planning Commission.
I too would give my pontification.
Yes.
It's not a formal, recommendation to approve or disapprove, but rather to allow the Planning Commission to discuss and create some regulations that would then have public input and then come back to the commission at some future date.
Yeah.
Do you want to make that in the motion, like acknowledge that he has presented this to you today would be, so we'd have an action, could we do that, Jim?
I don't-
Just acknowledge that we
Do
had
we
to have
need
the
it?
presentation?
You can do it however you
I-
want.
Madam Chair, or Madam Clerk,
Just
I would-
acknowledge,
I would move that we acknowledge the request to explore creation of regulations regarding wind and other alternative energy,
And go to the
and to go to the planning commission.
All right. So we've got a motion by Commissioner Cook, seconded by Commissioner Rippon. Those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you all for your attention and good questions.
Next item, please.
Item 5, public comment.
Okay, we do have Shane Horsch signed up to speak today.
Morning. My name is Shane Horsch, and I live at the corner of 69th and Barrington Road, and I'm here to speak about that project. I know my neighbor John's been here multiple times, and you've all received emails from me. I haven't heard anything back, but I guess that's your right not to say anything. But, you know, you're aware that we're not happy with the proposed redesign of the 69th and Barrington Road intersection and the addition of a turning lane, which will solve absolutely nothing and only serve to increase the size and scope of the project, waste taxpayer dollars, and literally screw over our community and the involved landowners. I know you're all fully aware of our family's displeasure in this project, as in my opinion will be one of the most greatly affected by it. And the design as it sits has many flaws, be it traffic-wise, the raping of the character of Barrington and the native creek that runs through our community, and specifically in front of several of our homes, and turning it into an unsightly man-made ditch with riprap all over the place. Not to mention the removal of many trees which have been growing for decades and add to the character of our individual lots, be it something nice to look at, or in my case, serving as a privacy barrier for 8 months out of the year when they have leaves on and kind of a shield from the traffic that's there. And I think what agitates me the most is the manner in which the county has been going about this project from the very beginning, with the secrecy in which the Public Works Department has operated. I can tell you right now, the way this project has proceeded is 1,000% the opposite of the America I've been taught I live in. You may be wondering what I mean by that comment. And for starters, the only way I was able to become aware of this project was when I found survey crews from Finney and Turnip Seed trespassing on my property about 3 years ago. I'm not sure the exact time, but it was before the pandemic, so it's about the only way that I can get the approximate timeline in my head. And they refused to tell me what they were there doing, and instead referred me to the county public works. I had to make numerous phone calls and was finally connected with the road and bridge department, where the information I was provided was very vague. Fast forward a few months after I caught your trespassing contractor on our land, and I see county employee Mike Welch in front of our property again with Finney and Turnip Seed employees, this time with the full-scale drawing of the project that he would only let me briefly look at after wanting to know what he was doing there. At that time, Shawnee County and Finney and Turnip Seed were in possession of construction plans, yet refused to share them with me nor any other affected landowner. After that encounter with Mike, I had to call and email approximately a year and a half before I was presented with the full size and scope of the project. It wasn't until early in the month of March 2022 that some of the landowners received notice of this project, which is 3 years after I had my first encounter with the survey crews and laid eyes on the plans the county had possession of. It wasn't until a couple weeks ago that I had made comments in various online communities announcing this project that the public was even aware of this. Operating in secrecy for 3 whole years and keeping people in the dark is the way fascist regimes such as Russia and China operate. This is not how American government, especially at the local level, should operate. It would have been extremely easy to keep the lines of communication open and involve the 5 to 6 of us that would be greatly affected, much less let the community be aware of what's going on. The secrecy and the changing of the landscape notwithstanding, there's no way in hell I want a 3-lane road right in front of my house. It's not safe. It's not going to be safe for the constituents that are dropping their kids off at the school. And it fails to address the elephant in the room, which is that the county is refusing to address and reconstruct as part of the project the way traffic moves into and out of the elementary school. I know my neighbor John and I have brought some common sense solutions forward, but the only feedback we've gotten from Public Works is that it is the school district's and township's problem, to address, not yours. The bottom line is that adding a turning lane will still have cars parked on Berryton Road during school days and pick-up and drop-off times and will impede traffic. Adding an additional through lane will only make it dangerous to those roughly 30 minutes a day pick-up and drop-off time that others in the community are using the intersection. There is no need to add a turning lane on Berryton Road, and in fact, I believe the cost can be cut back in the size and scope of this project if some simple solutions are implemented at the school. I'm not here just to voice my concerns, and in my emails I haven't. I offer solutions that so far no one has even taken the chance to hear out, including a specific school board member who is in possession of plans and seemed he had a vested interest in this project going through whether or not I like it. Right now, with the trees in the area and the way the road lies, it serves as a deterrent to motorists to not speed through the area, and the posted speed limit in Berryton is 30. A lot don't slow down, but many do due to the way the road sits with the slight bend. Straightening the road out will only serve to direct traffic through the area faster, which will be more dangerous for those parents and school buses traveling to the school. And my biggest personal concern is that my family, since we live right there, we, along with a few neighbors, utilize that intersection multiple times a day, routinely, and in less than 10 years, I'm going to have one of my sons that's going to be driving, and I've got another one not too far behind him. Turning to head northbound with that new proposed redesign will make it more dangerous for us to use on a daily basis. And I have many more valid issues and concerns that have been completely ignored, and at this point it seems as if the Public Works Department has its mind made up. And I've asked for diplomacy and discussed this project reasonably many times, and with y'all scheduling meetings and with other affected neighbors one by one, it appears you're trying to sell them that this project is going through whether any of us like it or not. It's not too late to change course and listen to those that live in the area instead of engineers who have made a couple field visits and have stared at an aerial map rather than personal experiences of those that are there day in and day out and see how the creek behaves, see the traffic patterns, and have valid safety concerns. I'm not standing here as a concerned citizen and simply complaining. I have solutions that no one's listened to or agreed to hear me out on. And Mr. Cook, I believe it was you about a month ago that praised my neighbor John and appreciating him voicing his concerns about this project before it was let out to bid and getting involved early. Well, I myself have been involved early and often in this process, just not officially at a council meeting until today. And I really hope you were sincere in that comment and that the commission will direct the Road and Bridge Department to rethink the design of this project and actually involve those affected by it. So far, all I've heard is lip service, and I think you all, and specifically the Public Works Department, have underestimated my personal conviction and motivation for the protection of personal property rights, much less the safety of my family and the safety of those going to the school. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wishing to speak today? Okay, seeing none, next item, please.
Item 6, Administrative Communications.
Any department heads wishing to speak today?
Good morning, Commissioners. Bill Sutton, Shawnee County Solid Waste. We are in springtime, so for those folks that have done some spring cleaning on the few nice days that we've had, this Saturday, April 2nd, from 9 until noon, Household Hazardous Waste will be open for our April Saturday collection event. So come on out to 131 Northeast 46th Street. Drop off all your household hazardous waste, and for more information, please feel free to call 286-4381. All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Bill. Anyone else? Seeing none, next item, please. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Rippon.
I don't have anything to report.
Okay, Commissioner Cook?
Commissioner Mays, I know that you have met with neighbors at 69th and Berryton. You've met with staff. I've discussed with Public Works as well. It seems that we are still having some sort of communications issues with the neighbors out on 69th Street in Berryton. I don't know if it's a direction or not, but in the past, when we've had issues like this come up, we've held public town hall meetings, such as on 29th Street in Croco. There were concerns with the neighbors at Aquarian Acres. We met over at Bettis and had the maps and the engineers there so that we could answer any questions the neighbors had. It may be a benefit to have this addressed. So, and again, we're early into the, I mean, there's been some work done, but we're still early into the project to maybe address these concerns. I don't know if the school district would allow us to use their building to hold a town hall meeting to discuss this, and with the township there, that may be the best way to resolve it, to allow everybody to get together at one place, one time, rather than getting ping-ponged around multiple times.
Well, we've talked about that, and I think that is something that's going to happen at some point, but right now, nothing is finalized. And so what we have currently is we've been meeting with folks individually, the people in that general proximity. Shane, you're included in that. I mean, we came out and talked to you, and I think you, from my understanding, have had other conversations with Public Works since then. I mean, what we want to make sure is that people understand the project and what's going to happen out there before we have any kind of a public meeting, because right now we don't have anything set in stone that we need to present. And sure, there will be a meeting at some point. I think anytime we do a major closure, there is one. And it won't be a complete closure, if I'm not mistaken. It'll be, there'll still be some detour available, correct, Kurt? Or did you want to speak to this, or?
Yeah, Kurt Niehaus, Director of Public Works. We do plan to have a public meeting, but as Commissioner May said, we're not advanced enough in the plans that we can competently tell the public what specifically we want to do. We have met with a number of landowners that are affected by the project, and so far, I believe the discussions have been positive, maybe with the exception of Mr. Horsch. The project isn't what it appears to be or what it's said to be. The project is a simple culvert replacement project. We have 3 culverts built in the late 20s that need to be replaced. We've never said this project was intended to solve a parking or traffic problem in front of a school on 69th Street. That is not the reason for the project. 69th Street is a township road. The school district has made some changes to their property over the past 10 years that have complicated the traffic issues on 69th. Trees. We've made an attempt, we've listened to Mr. Horsch, and we've changed the project details to minimize the number of trees that are needed on the project. Mr. Horsch has been given a set of plans. We have talked to Mr. Horsch. We will talk to him again. We're not doing anything in secret. But we can't really communicate with the public until we know what we're going to do. Common sense. We can't let the public design our projects. They all have individual needs. They all have individual priorities. It's our job as the Public Works Department and as professional engineers to develop a consensus in the community and to provide a project that minimizes the impact to the public and benefits the public at whole. The school board, Mr. Horsch is right, a member of the Shawnee Heights School Board met with him. We did not ask him to meet with Mr. Horsch. He did that on his own accord. The intersection, we are adding a left turn lane in the intersection. The project is not a 3-lane project, but we are adding a third turn lane, a dedicated turn lane in the intersection. It's not to solve a school traffic problem. It's there because during off hours, when the traffic counts are low, the turn lane provides a safe space for people making a left turn from southbound Barrington Road to eastbound 69th Street. We have listened to Mr. Horsch. Again, we have changed the plans. And we can change the plans slightly a bit more in the area that impacts him. The problem is, we've looked for a solution, but so far we've been unable to find one. We will continue to work with Mr. Horsch on a possible solution. But we have to go forward with this project. We have 3 culverts that are in need of replacement. That is what's driving this project, nothing else. Any questions?
No. And I might note that, there are county projects that we work on, Mr. Horsch, sometimes years, sometimes decades in the future. On the last sales tax extension, the 15-year sales tax extension, one of the projects listed was the reconstruction of Rochester Road. It's going to reconstruct from Rochester Road just north of where the North Topeka Walmart is, all the way up to where the roundabout is, just south of Seaman High School. That's going to be taking it from a 2-lane road to a 3-lane road. That's a huge undertaking that's going to affect a lot of landowners. It's going to require a lot of easements. It's a lot of landowners are going to see their yard size diminish as we add that 3rd turning lane. And I know that's a project that is decades, plural, in the planning. And so it's not something that we're just jumping into. And there was public notice on the sales tax, but I could probably guarantee you that if you were to go up on Rochester Road and start knocking on doors and ask them, do you know that there's a road construction project that will come to your neighborhood within the next 10 years that's going to take your part of your lawn? A lot of people probably wouldn't know it. Even if we mailed a letter every day, there would still be people that don't know it. But we are doing our best. I think it's unfair to call us a fascist regime of Russia or some other entity, because we do try to work with the public, and we do listen to the public, and we do have public notice that goes out. So I understand your concerns. I appreciate you being here. That's not just lip service. We want that.
Respond to what Kurt said, if I have a chance.
I think that we do also want to have public access, and so that's all I got to say about that.
Kurt, thank you. I don't necessarily want to have a back and forth today.
Well, I don't want to get
I mean,
back and forth, but there's no justification for making a turning lane there, because if there's been no traffic counts to justify it. You can sit at my house in the evening, and you can go sit outside sometimes for an hour, and there won't be a car that'll go by. I've been told more than once that the reason for adding the turning lane is due to the school. It may not have come from you, but someone else in your department isn't always truthful. So that's what I don't appreciate, and the lines of communication were not kept open, number one. And you can lessen the impact by keeping that a 2-lane road and fix 69 so that the buses have a lane to go to the school, make it safer for everybody. If safety, as I've heard you say in some other presentations at the council meeting, is your top priority.
All right. Let's have this conversation maybe after the meeting between the two. Would you guys be amenable to just chat for a little bit? Okay. Next item, please.
Item 7, executive session.
We do have a need for executive session today. I would make a motion that we go into executive session at 10, let's say 10:40, give everybody a few minutes, for consultation with an attorney for the body or agency which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship, specifically relating to the Manor Conference Center contract. No action is expected at this time.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made. What?
How many minutes?
What do you think? 15? Let's do 15 minutes. So a motion's been made by Commissioner Mays, seconded by Commissioner Rippon. Those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. We'll be in executive session at 10:40.
Look at that.
Hey.
All right, we're back from executive session. No action was taken. We are adjourned.
We had a majority, so you're good. And we've got